franchise players last year. It was Freddie Freeman, who the Braves saw walk to the Los Angeles Dodgers. This time around, it's shortstop Dansby Swanson. What are the Braves going to do with him? Are they going to let him get away as well? And if they do, what are some of the options and alternatives at shortstop? Because the Braves cannot go through this stretch run of championship caliber contention without having a bona fide leader at the shortstop position. So we'll look at Dansby Swanson's options, what that contract could look like with the Braves, and if not, who else is out there who could replace him. We'll cover all of that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. And download the Locked On Sports Atlanta app on Roku and Amazon Fire devices. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on Twitter at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast. If you're new, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. And while you're there, hit that thumbs up button and that notification bell. If you're watching this live with me, go ahead and do a favor and slam that thumbs up button there for me. I would appreciate it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen of every day. We continue to post episodes daily throughout the offseason, Monday through Friday. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube, subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast. With that out of the way, let's get into today's episode because this is the one I think a lot of you have been waiting for. This is going to be all about Dansby Swanson and the shortstop position. What do the Braves do? What are their options? What is a good contract for Dansby Swanson? Should Alex Anthopoulos give it to him, or should he look for some alternative options? And what are those options? We're going to discuss all of that on today's podcast. Let's start out with the obvious here. I talked about it in the open. It's the second offseason in a row now that the Atlanta Braves are having to make a really tough decision on a franchise player. I mentioned this on yesterday's podcast. Freddie Freeman was that guy who, was there before the rebuild. He went through the rebuild. He saw things start to come around, turn around, and he brought that championship to Atlanta. He was the guy. And I think right next to him is Dansby Swanson. Dansby Swanson for me kind of signifies the rebuild. That trade that they made with the Diamondbacks to get Swanson, Ender Inciarte, Aaron Blair, for Shelby Miller, that really started the turn of the rebuild, signified the rebuild. I don't think it was the first move out of all of them, but it definitely was the most significant one. You get a first overall pick in Dansby Swanson, who you expect to be your cornerstone player. Now, it didn't necessarily work out like that. Dansby never became that all-star, or at least early on was not that all-star caliber player, but still, he was your rock at shortstop, which I believe is one of the most important positions in baseball. That and catcher on the field anyways, I think are the two most important positions. And Dansby did a good job of leading there, and the way that he played, coming up with some clutch hits. And obviously, along with Freddie, bringing a championship back to the city of Atlanta. So for me, this is a big decision for the Atlanta Braves and what they're going to do. Are they going to let another franchise type player get away? I had this question in the chat section in yesterday's podcast, so I wanted to bring it back up. And it was, is Dansby worth bringing back? And my quick and short answer to that is yes, I definitely think he is. Look, I've been on the Dansby Swanson bandwagon for a while now, even before his all-star season this year. I've loved the leadership capabilities of Dansby Swanson. I love what he brings defensively. He just makes those instinctive plays that win you ball games. And I've always loved that about him, even if the bat hasn't necessarily always been there. This year, he got better with the glove. I think is going to be a Gold Glove finalist. Would not be surprised at all if he wins it. And the bat came around as well. We saw him have a career year with some of his averages. So again, is he worth bringing back? Absolutely. I think the Braves should definitely consider bringing him back and want to bring him back. I think both parties want that as well. You look at Dansby Swanson, he's coming off a career year at 28 years old. You can look at that and say, are you going to overpay on a guy who may never have a better season again? You could also say going into age 28 season, and I mentioned this going into 2022, that he's entering what typically are your prime years. Now, we've seen that age kind of move up a little bit, but still, 28 years old used to be considered entering your prime season. So, and not a huge surprise to see him have such a breakout year at 28 years old. You just wonder, can he keep that up for the next 4 or 5 years? This past season, he slashed 277, 329, 447, 25 homers, 99 runs, 96 runs batted in, and 18 stolen bases, 2 stolen bases shy of a 2020 season. Like I said, I would not be surprised at all if he wins the Gold Glove. He for sure should be a Gold Glove finalist. He was 11th in all of baseball, not just shortstops, not just National League players. All of baseball was 6.3 WAR according to Fangraphs, and he was second in all of baseball, not just shortstops and not just the National League, second in all of baseball in defensive WAR according to Fangraphs. So again, a huge year for Dansby Swanson, certainly a great year for him in a contract season. So speaking of contracts, what is he worth? And I already see one message here from William. He says Swanson not worth more than 6,150, even if we're going to be a top 5 payroll. I would not pay 6,150 for Dansby Swanson. I want to go through kind of my thought process with this. Last offseason, when I talked about this, I thought you could get Dansby on a 5-year deal for maybe 12 to 15 million a year. I thought that's kind of what he deserved at that point based on his career numbers. That's not happening now. And that's, where the Braves waited maybe too long. And now you're going to have to pay a little bit more than that, where I think maybe you could have got him on a cheaper deal last year, or maybe the Braves tried that and Dansby wanted to bet on himself. If so, good for him. But 12 to 15 million, I don't think it's going to get it done at this point. If it does, then AA is even more of a magician than we thought. The comparison I've always used with Dansby Swanson is Brandon Crawford. I thought he'd get something similar to Brandon Crawford, who got a 6-year deal. He still had ARB years left with the Giants when he got that 6-year deal, but in the free agent years of that deal, he got 15 million a season. So again, that's kind of where that 15 million price point came from. And the latest deal from Brandon Crawford, he got a 2-year deal that pays him 16 million a year. So I believe Dansby Swanson's in that range. Obviously prices go up, blame it on inflation if you want to. So for me, and again, I'm making this Brandon Crawford comparison. I think they're two very similar players in that they're glove first players who will occasionally give you something with the bat. And that's exactly what we've seen with Dansby Swanson. I don't think you overpay just simply on this year. I think you have to take, the entirety of his career into account when you look into it. And, Crawford, same way, he's a leader. He's also somebody who's a glove first player who, like I said, can give you some good seasons with the bat as well. Crawford won his first of 4 Gold Gloves at age 28, which is pretty interesting because I think Dansby could win his first of hopefully multiple Gold Gloves during his age 28 season. I mentioned Crawford's been up and down offensively throughout his career. He has a slash line of 253, 321, 400. Remember those numbers, 253, 321, 400. Now check out Dansby's slash line in his career, 255, 321, the exact same on-base percentage, and a 417 slugging. So basically the same player for what Brandon Crawford's been for his career. Obviously, Crawford's been around a little bit longer now, is at the end of his career. But again, I just think this comparison is too easy to make. You have some very solid defensive shortstops who can give you a little bit offensively. Dansby gives you a little bit more power and a little bit more speed. Many in the industry believe Dansby will get 20 million. That's the number I think you've seen a lot of people throw around. I've seen David O'Brien at the Athletic throw around 20 million. For me, that's the max that I would give Dansby Swanson on a yearly basis. And you look at all the deals that Alex Anthopoulos has given out, he's yet to go above 22 million. I don't think Dansby Swanson's that guy who's going to go above the $22 million mark for. So for me, 20 million is the max I give Dansby Swanson a year. And this is coming from a guy who's a huge supporter of Dansby Swanson, but that's the max for me. I think 18 million a year seems pretty fair. You know, you compare it to what he's done over his career and you compare it to what Brandon Crawford got, you know, at a similar point in his career extrapolated to, you know, what the market fit is now. To me, 18 million a year seems pretty fair. Again, I'd go to 20 if I had to get it done, but I think 18 million is a better price point there for a high AAV for Dansby Swanson. Then the question becomes how many years he'll play next year at age 29. You know, obviously, as you get older, the defense starts to deteriorate a little bit, and that's been Dansby Swanson's best tool so far is the defense. So if you see that decline, then what type of player, you know, does he become? So personally, for me, I wouldn't go more than 5 years, but it likely takes a 6th year to get it done. And if that's the case, then that's okay. You know, maybe 5 with an option year. You know, I would not go more than 6. Again, I'd like to go 5 at 18 million a year. If it takes 6 at 18 million a year, that's perfectly fine. That's kind of where I settled on 6 at 18 million a year. So that's 6 years, $108 million. To me, that's a deal that gets it done. I think it's a fair deal for Dansby Swanson and the player that he is and what he means to this Braves team. Again, I would not pay him just strictly off of 2022. That's his best year. He may never have a year like that again. So I pay him off what he's done for his career. And I think 16 to $18 million a year is very fair for what he's done so far. Again, giving that Brandon Crawford comparison. And again, between ages 29 and 34 for Brandon Crawford. So this is, you know, where Dansby Swanson is heading. He slashed 261, 330, 422. So you actually saw the numbers for Crawford get better during that age 29 to 34 season. A 102 OPS plus, so just barely above average, you know, offensively. Three gold gloves during that time for Brandon Crawford, 2 all-star appearances in 1 year of getting MVP votes. If Dansby Swanson gives you something similar to that, you know, over the next 5 to 6 years, I think you definitely will take that, and that would be worth, you know, the 18 million a year. And, you know, as I saw our Gaten 3 say in the comment section here, Dansby provides leadership. Yeah, it's a quality you don't necessarily pay for, but, you know, it is something that I think Dansby Swanson has huge value in and what he brings. He's, as Charlie Morton called him, the captain of this team. And so I think there's something to that. But I thought the same thing with Freddie Freeman. I thought that's why he would never leave. But obviously things played out there the way that they did. Lockout didn't help that situation at all. But if it were me, I'm the GM and I'm not. 6 years, $108 million, $18 million a year salary. That's what I would give Dansby Swanson and feel good about. If you have to go to the 120 to get it done, then so be it. You know, I don't think that deal would necessarily kill you, but that would be the highest. That would be the max for me for Dansby Swanson. So that's where I think things will settle somewhere in that area. And I think a deal does get done. Ultimately, I think the Braves do re-sign Dansby Swanson. But if they don't, who are they going to replace him with? And that's the question Alex Anthopoulos has to answer. Is there a Matt Olson out there ready to replace another franchise type player in Dansby Swanson? We'll look at those alternatives next. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game that you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. Currently watching the Phillies Padres as we're recording this here and what's been an entertaining game 1 of the NLCS. Wish we were still in it. But you want to check that out, you can do so over at BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball postseason, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So if the Atlanta Braves don't bring back Dansby Swanson, what are they going to do? Because my biggest thing with all of this is you don't want to bring back Dansby Swanson. That's fine. Who are you going to replace him with? Because again, I've said it. It's in my Twitter handle, shortstop ball. I believe shortstop position is maybe the biggest position on the field. You got to have a leader there, somebody that can hold things down defensively. So you don't have Dansby Swanson. Who are you going to get? You look at the free agent market. It's a big free agent market for shortstops. You know Trea Turner is going to be there. Carlos Correa already opted out. We're expecting Xander Bogaerts to opt out as well and be available. So those are three shortstops that, according to most national writers out there, ranks above Dansby Swanson in terms of free agents, just period. So it's going to be a crowded shortstop market. That's why I tweeted out and I talked about it yesterday. Does Dansby Swanson consider taking the $19 million qualifying offer, play out next year with the Braves, hit the free agent market after his age 29 season, where he'll likely be the top shortstop available? I don't think he'll do that and risk it because he is coming off a career year, and I think he'll get that big bag, that multi-year deal. But could be a scenario that we're talking about here before too long. But again, I don't expect that to happen. And if the Braves don't re-sign Dansby Swanson, you got Trea Turner, Carlos Correa, and Xander Bogaerts. Just, to clear the air here, if the Braves aren't going to pay for Dansby Swanson, I don't see them paying for Trea Turner, Carlos Correa, Xander Bogaerts, who are likely going to cost more. As I said in the first segment, the Braves have yet to give a player over $22 million a year. Do you really think they're going to do that on Trea Turner, Carlos Correa, or Xander Bogaerts? I just don't see that happening. And as much as I love Trea Turner, that's a huge step back defensively at shortstop. Carlos Correa and Xander Bogaerts are better overall fits to me. Although I would love Trea Turner at the top of that order, what he brings with the bat. But you watch that Dodgers-Padres series, you saw Trea Turner make several big mistakes defensively in that series. But it'd have to be one of those three guys. I mean, if you're going to let Dansby Swanson go, you got to get one of those three guys if you're getting one through the free agent market, because after them, it's Elvis Andrus and Jose Iglesias. And Andrus had a resurgence there at the end of the year with the White Sox. I'm not a big believer in that. Iglesias has come around with the bat, and he's one of the best defensive players in all of baseball. But again, that's a big drop off. Both of those guys are at the end of their careers. Those would essentially be stopgap players. So you look at trade targets. What trade targets are out there? I'm going to go ahead and just to finish off the free agent. I don't think the Braves are getting any of those free agents. I just don't see it happening. If they did, I think Carlos Correa is probably the best of the group, but I just don't see that happening. But those are your free agent options. You look at trade targets. Obviously, we don't know what could be available, and Alex Anthopoulos knows way more than we do what's out there. But just kind of a quick glance, Willy Adames for the Brewers. I think it might be a big offseason for the Brewers. I'm really curious to see what they're going to do. If they decide to maybe tear things down a little bit, maybe do a soft rebuild, Willy Adames has been a really good shortstop the last 2 years. He's expected to get a big jump in arbitration this year, projected at $9.2 million. And we've seen the Brewers, don't. That's typically when they'll trade players, when they get that big jump in arbitration. You look at Josh Hader, who they just traded. Willy Adames just turned 27. He's 6th in Fangraphs WAR among shortstops. He's been very solid defensively over there, very good with the bat as well. He may have been their best offensive player for the Brewers this year. So I think Willy Adames could be an option there, but then it comes down to what trade capital do you have to trade? At this point, the Braves farm system, obviously, very low, but perhaps the Braves could work something out there. Another one, I don't think this will happen, but White Sox could be getting a new manager. Not really sure what's going on over there. If they decided to part ways with Tim Anderson, I think that could be an enticing option there as well. He has a $12.5 million team option for 23, a $14 million team option for 24. has been banged up a lot the past couple of years, missed a lot of this past season, which had a lot to do with why the White Sox struggled so much. But when healthy, he is a hit machine. He's one of the best hitters in all of baseball. Still kind of a raw player. He grew up in Alabama and played with the Barons here in Birmingham, so I'm very familiar with him, seen him a lot. But an athletic kid, obviously a lot of energy that I think would fit in that clubhouse. So again, I don't know that he's available. We don't know exactly who's available, but those are two trade targets that, if Dansby doesn't work out, you're not willing to pay the price tag on Turner, Correa, or Bogarts. Perhaps you switch gears and try to go after an Adames or a Tim Anderson if they're available. And if none of those options are good enough and you have to look internally, your options are Vaughn Grissom. And I think the Braves are very clear they don't trust him defensively, not even at the shortstop position, but they didn't trust him at second base either, where he wasn't particularly great defensively, and all the scouting reports on him say that he probably won't stay at shortstop. I think he's too young and athletic of a kid to give up on him like that defensively, but that's one of your options there. The another option is Orlando Arcia, who has played shortstop a lot in his big league career. I think he could certainly be serviceable there, but there's a reason why he got pushed out in Milwaukee. There's a reason why, he hasn't really stuck as a starter in the Braves. Has been more of a fill-in bench type guy, but there's another internal option. Braden Shoemake, look, for me, I've never been a huge fan of his. He obviously ended the season injured, never really got it going at the higher levels. That's just not an option for me. And then I got to mention this one because we're just, we're looking at all the possible options. Ozzy Albies came up as a shortstop. I don't see him as that right now. I don't know that he has the arm for it, but he did come up as a shortstop. I guess in an emergency situation, or if nothing else works out, you could put him there and then maybe use Arcia or Grissom at second base. I don't like that scenario. I don't think that scenario is going to happen, but I'm just throwing out all the options out there. So for me, if you're asking my opinion, what should the Braves do? Get Dansby Swanson, bring him back. I mean, I think what you get in Dansby Swanson. You know the type of player he is, what he means to that clubhouse, what he means to this team. You know what you're getting, day in, day out. He's bringing his best to the yard. I'd go get Dansby Swanson, whether it's 6 years at $18 million a year, 6 years at $20 million a year. I got to think one of those gets it done. Hopefully it's more towards the $18 million a year, but I think, something in that price range gets it done and you get Dansby Swanson back. That's what I would do. I don't see them overpaying for Trea Turner. I don't really think Adames or Tim Anderson are available in trades, and I don't like the internal options. So, again, for me, go get Dansby Swanson, re-sign him. That's what I think the Braves should do. All right, next, come back. I'm going to update you on what's going on in the postseason, take some of your questions and comments here on Dansby Swanson as well. So on Tuesday, the Yankees and Guardians finally got to play Game 5. The Yankees were victorious, so they move on to the ALCS where they'll face the Astros. For me, I think you can go ahead and hand the trophy to the Astros. I thought they were the best team coming in. I think their path in the American League is very easy. I don't trust that Yankees team. I picked the Guardians to win that series, and I think there's a strong case if that game's played on Monday with the Yankees bullpen was absolutely taxed. I think there's a better case for the Guardians to win that game. But either way, the Yankees won it. They move on to the ALCS to face the Astros. Phillies and Padres currently in game 1 of the NLCS. Phillies up 2-0. A couple of home runs, including one from Kyle Schwarber that was hit nearly 120 miles per hour. So the Phillies remain red hot right now. It's playing in San Diego. I want to take a quick look at some of the comments talking about Dansby Swanson. Read a couple of them already. This one from William Fulgham. Sorry, I messed that name up there, William. Says Swanson at 23 AAV or Turner at 30, same years. I would do Swanson at 23. If those are your options, I'm all about the defense, and I would take Dansby's Gold Glove and the offense that he gives you over the upgrade offense that Turner gives you and the below average defense that he gives you. So I would go with Swanson at 23 AAV over the 30 million that for Trea Turner. This next one says the Phillies may offer for him. I'm guessing you're assuming Dansby or Turner, but I think the Giants are going to get him. The Phillies need well, I'll say this. The Phillies, I like Bryson Stott. I think he's the future there. If they feel like he can handle the shortstop position, I haven't seen anything to say otherwise. So I think the Phillies are actually okay at shortstop with Bryson Stott. I think he's going to be a good major league hitter. Giants are going to be an interesting team this offseason. A lot of people thinking that they're going to go after Aaron Judge and try to get him. Obviously, Brandon Crawford's the guy I've comped to Dansby Swanson, so I certainly think he would be of interest to them. But I think it's going to be a big offseason for the Giants. William says that Turner will go to the Phillies. I think Bryson Stott's their future there. I think they're fine. William also says, really think Braves go for a big-time starter and a hitting left fielder. Look, I talked about this yesterday. If you get DeGrom or Verlander on a high AV for 1 or 2 years, then maybe you do it. Otherwise, I don't really see the Braves going after a starting pitcher. I'm fine with the starting pitching they have. I do think perhaps they look at making a big splash in left field and getting a upgraded bat there. Wendy says, I don't see why they would go get a starter. I agree, Wendy. I don't see the need to go out and get a starter. Again, if you want to get one of those top guys and you want to pay for that, by all means, go for it. I just don't consider it a huge need for me. Christopher Shaffy says that Dansby needs to listen to Chipper's words of advice and wisdom. Yeah, Freddie, I think regrets not listening to Chipper's advice and ended up, missing out on an opportunity to finish his career with the Braves. Dansby, obviously, I'm sure is getting that same advice. You want to play for the Braves, you want to be here. You may have to take a little bit of a discount to do it, but you see, I think it was pretty obvious how unhappy Freddie was, even going back to his hometown, pretty much. So again, we'll see what Dansby decides. I don't know Dansby personally, but I certainly know it hurt Freddie Freeman. Braves should try to get Jock back for left field. I've seen so many people asking about getting Jock Peterson back. I just don't see that happening with Eddie Rosario on the roster. Kind of redundant. Yes, I feel like at this point, Jock Peterson's probably the better of the two, although I said last offseason I agreed with going with Eddie Rosario over Jock Peterson. So I just don't see it happening with Eddie Rosario on the roster. Maybe Chisholm from Miami. He's not happy there and loves the Braves. Yeah, there's this, theory out there that Jazz Chisholm wants to join the Braves, that he's a big Braves fan, but I don't see Miami letting him go away, especially not to an NL East rival. All right, that does it for the chat section there. Appreciate everybody who joined live. Again, I'll be going live a lot this offseason, doing kind of these conversations. So you want to be a part of that, be looking for it. I'll tweet it out probably about 15, 20 minutes before we go live on my Twitter feed, again, between about 8 and 10 p.m. Central every weeknight. So be on the lookout for that. But that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen of every day. Now go make a Locked On MLB your second listen, where MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and a unique perspective, talking about the biggest stories from around the league. Again, thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. You can follow me at Shortstop Ball. That's where you get notified when we go live for these off-season episodes. Also, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.